In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. This is how Scripture begins. In the beginning, God created and it was good. God's longing for creation was that it be a place of wholeness, a place of right relationship, a place where things function as God longs for them to function, for creation to be a place of flourishing. Now, this is a really quick history of God's relationship to creation that's going to leave out a ton of stuff, so bear with me. But there in the garden, before the fall, there was harmony between God and the earth, harmony between humanity and the earth, harmony between humans and God. Everything was as it should be. As I said, a place of peace, a place of wholeness. Every part of God's good creation was flourishing as God longed for it. And a part of that flourishing is that God invited humanity to share in the work of contributing to a flourishing earth. So in Genesis 2, we find God giving Adam the task of tilling and keeping the earth. This is a part of God's intent for Adam to till and to keep it. In addition, Adam got to name all the animals. And this is before the fall. Adam's invited into this working, into this caring, into this contributing and co-laboring with God, helping creation to flourish. And then we have the whole serpent and the fruit and the apple debacle. We have that thing that we label the fall. Adam and Eve become aware of their own sin, and there is fragmentation. The world no longer reflects God's intent. It is a world that is fragmented, a world that's broken, a world where death in all of its many forms, not just the one we experience in life, but all the little deaths that we experience in forms of brokenness, becomes a part of the human experience. And it is what creation itself experiences. So then we track God and creation throughout the centuries. And what do we find? We find God pursuing creation, only to find that humanity finds its way to mess it up. Over and over again, this is the pattern. God seeks to make things right. Creation oftentimes responds positively. Humans respond, okay, God, we want to come back to you, only to lose their way. And again, this is terribly truncated and overly simplistic version. So forgive me, I'm just trying to get to the end quickly. So you have that happening over centuries, and then enter Jesus, Son of God, God in the flesh. In the words of the gospel writers, Jesus comes proclaiming the inbreaking kingdom of God. And after time, Jesus is crucified, Jesus is buried, and on the third day, Jesus is raised from the dead. Death, in all of its many forms, is overcome in that single moment. In the life, death, and ministry of Jesus, a new way has broken in. That, in fact, is the exact replication of how God wanted things to be in the first place. That Jesus is an embodiment of God's original intent for creation. Jesus is an embodiment of God's preferred and promised future. And a major tenet of the Christian faith is that we believe that one day all things will be made right. Fragmentation that we experience will be no more. Death in all of its many forms will be no more. Brokenness will be no more. In other words, we believe that things will end as they began. But we don't experience that in its fullness. We live in this in-between place, right? On the one hand, we still experience and participate in the brokenness of creation. But on the other hand, we also trust that in the life of Jesus, there's a new creation ushered in. So what does all this mean, and why does it matter living in this in-between place? So I want to introduce a word to you that may be new. It was new to me up until a couple of years ago. And the word is prolepsis. It's a fun word to say, prolepsis. That's the noun, adverb, proleptic. Again, it just rolls off the tongue, prolepsis. Merriam-Webster defines it as this. It is the representation or assumption of a future act or development as if presently existing or accomplished. So let me give us some examples of this. There's a well-known book that became a movie about a Catholic sister, Helen Prejean, who worked with inmates on death row. And she wrote a memoir called Dead Man Walking. Became a movie, it was very well known. So Dead Man Walking is a proleptic statement, right? It's talking about a future, which is this man's death from death row, but he's walking, right? So it's something that's happening in the future that they're acting as if it's happening now. So here's another example. If you perhaps have had children or a roommate that's consistently late, you're trying to leave the house, that family member or that roommate is lagging behind. And so you scream down the hall or you scream up the stairs, hey, we're in the car and we're pulling out of the driveway right now, right? At that moment, you're not actually in the car and you're not actually you're pulling out of the driveway. You're making a point. You're acting as if something that's going to happen in the future is happening right there to make a point. So to live proleptically is to behave now how we believe the world will be ordered when all things are made right. Are you following with me here? We embody with our words, with our actions, with our posture towards other, God's preferred and promised future. Simplistically, I suppose some could say that I'm arguing that we resurrect the old WWJD, what would Jesus do, bracelets. And I'm not opposed, but that's not actually what I'm going for, because I want to be clear. What I'm talking about is not just about what we do, it's a way of being. I'm saying that we begin to order our lives now by the rhythms and the postures and the instincts and desires that God has in God's inbreaking kingdom that was at the beginning of time, that was ushered in the life of Jesus and will come to fruition when all things are made right. And there's obvious ways to live this out that we should mention, right? We should practice forgiveness. We should practice mercy. We should seek to embody the fruits of the Spirit in everything that we do, right? We want to avoid toxic or destructive behavior. We want to avoid things that fragment our relationship to others or our relationship to God. But I also want to unpack some other implications for this kind of proleptic living. In the beginning, God invited humanity to care for the earth, to keep it and to till it, to contribute to human flourishing. But it wasn't an endless endeavor. In fact, work, though it was there before the fall, the curse of the fall is that work would be toilsome. So God's intent, God's preferred and promised future involves some certain amount of rest, that it's not endless toil. And we trust, at least I do, that when all things are reconciled and all things are made right, the new heavens and the new earth will not be an endless toil. So if we trust that's where we're headed, how might we live today as we trust what that promised and preferred future might be? It won't be to the fullest, right? We're going to have some limitations, but are there rhythms of rest that you can adopt? Are there intentional things that you can do to slow down, to order your life a little bit more like we trust it's going to be when all things are made right? In the beginning, all of creation had enough, not too much, not too little. And we trust that when all things are made right, we will neither overconsume or be overconsumed. So how might we order our lives today, trusting in that promise and preferred future? If you were to take an inventory of your life, are there ways, are there things, are there aspects that are consuming you or consuming others around you that don't reflect God's intent? How might you reorder your life a little bit to reflect what God intends? And I'm not just talking about stuff and the ways that we are constantly consuming stuff and being fed stuff by all the different advertisements and the barrage of information we're getting. I'm not just talking about items or material items, but I'm also talking about our time. How are we over-consuming time? Now, this is connected to rest, but not mutually, not intimately connected in that we can actually be present while we're still doing something. I'm talking about presence. One more. In the beginning, God's creation was marked by generosity. What are ways that you can reflect God's preferred and promised future and be more generous? And again, I'm not just talking about stuff. I'm not just talking about the money we have. I'm talking about a generous posture towards other, perhaps being generous with our time. One of the things I'm trying to propose this evening is that it isn't just about learning how to respond or react appropriately, right? Someone says or does something and we respond in the right way. Now that matters, but that's not the only thing that matters. It's also about proactively posturing and ordering our life that makes it possible for us to receive God's intent for creation. With all of that said, let me say this, and I feel like this is something I repeat all the time in this space: be kind to yourself. We're not Jesus. We're not going to get everything right. You will try over and over again, and you'll fail at times. The object isn't to be perfect. It is to every day take that next step in trying to order our lives in a way that reflects God's longing for the world. So please be kind to yourself. Also, take the next small step. Don't take too big of a step in this. Don't bite off more than you could chew. My hunch, it's March 1st. My hunch is that New Year's resolutions have surely died off by now for most people. And that's primarily because the resolutions we make are a little bit out beyond what we're actually capable of doing. They're a little bit beyond our reach. So take the next small step and trust that God is with you and loves you in that small step. One of the most formative songs of my youth came from Lamentations 3. Steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. There's something about that last line, they're new every morning, that always stuck with me. This pursuit to live into God's preferred and promised future is a lifelong pursuit. We're human beings, we're flawed, and we never arrive in this pursuit. I want you to hear me on that. We never fully arrive. But the steadfast love of God never ceases. With every day, the sun rises anew and it sets anew. And with every day, God invites us to live once more as it was in the beginning and as we believe it will be in the end. So my invitation for you tonight, my invitation for you over the coming days and weeks and months is, in what way might you order your life to live as you know, as you trust, as you believe God would have this world to be?